Hi folks, it's Dr. Rowe here, and I'm hoping I'm going to be joined by Harminder, who has asked me if I could talk about a subject that a lot of people do ask me when I'm out and about speaking, which is how do I get into public speaking? How did that journey start? What was the process I went through? Those type of things. And he wanted to pick my brains. We've had a few technical glitches. I will take my glasses off in a minute. I just need to see if I can see you all. I'm literally sat here in a replacement car while my car was being serviced. Electric cars, slightly different service process. Oh, I think Harminder's just requested something there. Harminder is watching. I don't know how I'll get him in. Add Harminder.
Hi, Ro.
You're in.
There we go. Okay, we got there in the end. That's sorted.
Technology for you. There you go.
There we go. But anyway, it's great to have you on the line here because I know you've had a very busy weekend. So I thought we're talking to the space of.
I just come back from Berlin.
Yes, to give some context to people listening, and bear in mind this is live now. Anybody can jump in and listen to this. And I wanted to talk to people, number one, who are part of Growth Tribes, number two, who've listened to our podcast, and just give them a softer version of this. So you just come from Berlin, and how many people are you speaking in front of?
Version. It was quite a small audience. It's about 600 people. So I was asked about a month ago to go over and speak, and I had a slot initially of 90 minutes. But then when I arrived there, having done a live version of this a week before, they said that they felt there was so much content coming out, they wanted to give me 2 slots. But I can maybe unfold that story if we're going to do, if you want to ask me a good question. So yeah, it was people from all over. So Holland, the UK, Germany, France, Romania, Poland, a lot of people there. And really coming to learn about the mindset of wealth creation, success, becoming financially independent, that type of thing.
That's fantastic. So what I think will be useful for listeners at home is if there's anybody listening to this and they're an aspirational speaker, i.e. they want to be a public speaker or they have a powerful message to share, whether it's online or offline, directly in front of people on a stage or in a small environment, where did you start from? What was when you first became a public speaker all those years ago, and how many years ago? What was the audience size you were speaking to then, and what have you scaled up to now? Maybe share a bit of that story.
So when I was about 9 in front of the school reading a book. No, jokes aside, I used to stutter a little bit. In schools they say, Rohan, would you stand up and read an extract from this book? I would stand up and English lit or whatever it was in my young years, 8, 9, 10, 11 years of age. And I would sit there and I would open up and I'd get nervous and I would actually start to stutter. I didn't do it one-to-one, but I'd just get nervous whilst expressing myself there. So that just takes you back. So if anyone's watching this and you are genuinely nervous about being in front of audiences or any sort of public speaking, that's literally where I was going back, 40 something years ago.
And if somebody knows you now and they've seen you speak, they'll be like, no way way
normally,
was Ro stuttering
normally
at
the
some
stuttering
point.
is because I'm trying to speak too quickly and my mouth and my words can't keep up with each other. Now, then what happened was, when I was in my teenage years, I was asked to go and help out. I used to do a lot of outdoor pursuits, canoeing, climbing, that type of thing. I still do, but not to the same extent. And so I'd be thrown into a group of kids who I was teaching to canoe or teaching to climb. I'd get them in a circle. And actually, oddly enough, without me having to sit and read something out of a book, but just talk about what I was passionate about, it just flowed. And very quickly, the school teacher there identified that I was like a good guy to explain things to people. And I didn't realize then that actually that was part of the gift that I had, my passion, my purpose. So I just went into that space. By the time I got to 18, 19 years of age, I was doing it at camps, climbing camps, and these sorts of things. And I went into colleges to teach children on the mindset, about 20 years of age, on the mindset of being more successful in their studies. And that's because at 18, 19, I'd started reading personal development books. And I became really passionate about the idea of revising, getting focused when you're revising. And I started reading these books on mind mapping by a guy called Tony Buzan, who I've shared the stage with. He must be close to 75, 80 now. He and I have been on the same stage a couple of times now. But it's ironic that then I was in my mid to late teens and I was studying his content.
Yeah, yeah.
And that got me in front of audiences talking about subjects which I was enthusiastic about. And that was at a young age, like 19, 20. And then that slowly evolved through my university years and giving presentations. And I just found myself, I just loved it. And then when I got to do my PhD, they asked me to come and talk to the undergraduates. And I used to hold these little classes and I would teach them about engineering. But then at the end, they'd say, oh, Ro, would you come and talk to us about revising and how did you get your PhD and how did you get your exams? So I then run these ad hoc sessions in this room where I just get as many people together, sat on a desk, sometimes sat on a chair, and they just gather around and I just talk about things in a passionate way about what they could do.
So there's a really good point there. I'll jump in before you carry on the story. Isn't it fascinating that when sometimes people are there to learn about the how-to,
right,
but all the soft skills that are the foundation of actually allowing you to deliver the how-to, that's what people are really interested in. So the communication, the relationships, the how to manage money, all of those elements are actually what people want to know. The how-to, almost you figure that out along the line.
True.
So that's quite fascinating that even then the soft skills is what they approached you about back then. Now, in Growth Tribes and your personal development event, Turning Point, CWI, they come to learn those of you, and you already started teaching people those tools back in the day.
I mean,
That's
in actual
fascinating.
physical years, it would be about 32 years of doing that now. And the odd thing is, Harms, that it was in the university environment particularly, it was managing their time and managing the stress levels that they were attaching to the revision and the results they were going to get. So how did you feel when you went through your degree? My first part of my degree, I got a third. So I spent my first 2 years at university partying, having fun, drinks, ladies, you name it, climbing. I mean, I loved it. And I was great. I was a massive sports fan as well. So although I had the capacity to work, I don't think I was particularly bright. I think I just knew how to work well. I just chose not to do that. So I had a mentor at the time who is still a very dear friend of mine now, who said to me, look, you are an Asian guy going into a profession where there's not a lot of Asian people. He was a West Indian guy, went through the same thing himself. He got a third in his part ones, and I got a third in my part ones. And he knew my capacity and my ability. And he said to me, your mum's worked her guts out to put you into university here, and you've had to get grants and everything else. You need to step it up, man. And I was like, shit. So that kick up my backside really catapulted my attitude towards studying. So I went through this whole emotional roller coaster and really focused in. And alongside that, I was reading personal development books. So by the time I got to teaching people a couple of years later, when I got my PhD, these undergraduates were like, we're stressed with this, with this. I said, okay, this is what I did. I broke it down like this. I managed my time like this. I used mind mapping. I used color. I would go out for a walk if I got stressed. I would go for a run, and I was giving them all the things that back in those days were my system of managing it. And I was reading these books, and I was saying, go read this book, Magic of Thinking Big, which is a book I read years ago.
Those taboo subject books. People call it self-help, but that actually navigated. That navigated.
You couldn't buy that book in a bookshop. I mean, those books I got because I started a network marketing business at like 21 years of age. And although it was selling washing up liquid and makeup and you name it, what it came with was a personal development program from the States. So I still remember paying, it was £3.50 per week, which may not sound like a lot of money, but you got to rewind back to 80s. And a student with no money, I was literally paying out £3.50. I had a tape and a tape player in my Mini, which we literally had to kind of wire in. It wasn't fitted in. It wasn't like now. So I bought this secondhand one from a Tips. We used to go to the old car Tips, buy the units. We'd wire it in so that I could take it out because it was going to get nicked if I left it in the car. And I'd have these tapes, and I put these personal development tapes in. Sometimes they get mashed up because they get overheated. So I'd get some of the students to sit in with me and go, yeah, this is what I used to listen to when I was going through my degree. And they're like, oh man, this is amazing. So that started way back in the day. Now, I mean, I'm here in a Tesla, which is like, I can just press a button and it just plays that kind of stuff. But in those days, you had to go looking for it. And I think that's one of the challenges today. People don't put enough effort into the tiny things. It's that 15. I learned at about 21 years of age, read 15 minutes a day, 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 and it adds up over a year. So it started then, and that's how and then I just put myself forward as many volunteering opportunities as I could. So local colleges, local kids get-togethers, And they want me to come and talk about professional, like engineering and maths and all that. And I said, no, I want to talk about the skills needed to become successful in this arena.
Yeah.
Because you're teaching them the how to, but nobody's teaching them the soft skills. I don't even like to call them soft skills. They're probably fundamental foundation skills. So it started there. And then.
So what was the number? What was the number? Because I love to put it into context.
Size.
How many people did you have in your group size?
Oh my gosh, I would say probably about 10 to 15, something like that. Nothing more than that. I still got, if I can find it, Harms, I'll see if I can post it on our growth tribes. I've still got one of the original mind maps that I wrote for college students around early 90s to teach them how to revise. And there was like a mind map that went through all the stages. And I did it in A3 and then I photocopied it. And that was my, no slides, nothing. I just handed it out to everybody. I go, right, here's the mind map. Just to show you, you don't need lots of content. This one mind map is a 1 hour presentation I'm going to give you, but you could use the same thing for your lectures or for your exams, etc. So it started there. It didn't really scale up then until I got into my PhD and I was asked to go and present my research into a professional environment, which was the Institute of Civil Engineers. So I got invited to go and talk at some conferences as a guest alongside my supervisor, or just on my own. And suddenly it went from 15 to sort of 50 to 80, sometimes 100 people at conference, but much more professional. And that's when I started to realize, although I had all this bottled up passion, it's one thing to talk about a technical subject. It's another thing to talk about something that really changes people's lives. And I didn't make that connection until probably, oh my gosh, after I got my PhD and I actually started working. And then I was out speaking to people I was still doing network marketing at that point. And I noticed that when I was doing my network marketing presentations, 5, 10, 15, 20 people, I just came alive. But if I went and did a presentation on my engineering field for an hour, I could do it with enthusiasm, but I didn't come away feeling the same way. So I won competitions. As a PhD student studying, I was invited to the Institute of Civil Engineers to a competition, and we submitted our paper, and I had to put all these slides together, literally hand-drawn slide, and it was all done like that. And I got into the local competition and I won another one, and it sort of went on from that. So all technical stuff. I don't talk about it these days. Yeah, that's kind of where I was back in those days. And that was in the 90s now. We've moved from the 80s into the 90s. So anyone watching this, and I still say this to would-be speakers now, I took any opportunity to just go speak anyway, whether it was 10 people, 8 people, 15, oh my gosh, 30 felt like a lot. And then it became local networking groups like the Yes groups, which is a personal development spin-off from Tony Robbins, that type of thing. There was no formal training at all. It was just purely, and maybe we can come back to that subject, but it was purely reading and watching. I made it a habit of, especially with the network marketing business, and I'm not advocating it as a business, I'm saying for me it was a learning curve. I would sit there in the national, like the NEC in Birmingham, where I now go speak. I would sit in these big conference halls watching these speakers, and I was going, oh my God, there's Les Brown. You know, I was with Les Brown in India just a few years ago, and I was telling him, I used to watch you, Les. I used to listen to you in my little car, but there's Les Brown, and there's Roger Black, who now I speak alongside. Roger Black back in the early days spoke after he won some Olympic medals. Chris Abusi, Serrano Fines, who I happened to speak alongside just about a year and a half ago. So these are people back in those days with lots of hair. I was just sort of like, in my journals, I was just
in the audience.
So I was just, oh my gosh, I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do that. I'm so passionate. I want to do that. I want to do that. And that was kind of a drive for me. So I would just, anywhere I could be around another speaker to listen to how they delivered and what they were delivering, that was me. I was just like a sponge.
And then what you did from there. So I'm going to go off on a tangent before we finish off on speaking about 1,000 people. So this is interesting for me to know, because some of this I hadn't been aware of. So then you learn, and did you catalog it? Did you jot it down, or did you start to say, okay, these are the good things these speakers are doing. These are things maybe they can improve, which is now over the many years you've implemented, but also created the Communicating with Impact training program, which is run twice now. So how did that come about? Because that's got 38 components, which say, if you master these 38 components, your communication, it takes it to another level altogether. So at what point do you start cataloging it?
So if we go back, just rewind it in reverse then. So CWI, as you know, launched last year, but that came about because I spent so many years teaching other speakers how to speak and people how to communicate. I was just dripping all these different components without saying, oh, this is component number 25. This is component number 4. So when we put it together and you were sat there in the first one, it was the first time publicly I had actually presented the whole system. I think there was a gentleman in the audience that said, this is like the whole of your intellectual property. So it's all in one go. Which is why, if you remember, people were almost overwhelmed, because to unload that much content in a short space of time was unprecedented. But if you rewind back how that started, my approach to studying when I'm in an audience or if I'm learning like that is I will just watch and watch and watch, and I'll go, oh wow. And I go here. I go, right, what hit me here? What hit me in the heart? Why did I suddenly start to cry? Why did I feel an emotional heaviness? Why did I feel ecstatic? Why are people around me getting so much? So what did the speaker do at that moment? Was it a story? Was it a very hard hit? Was it a personal share? Was it a technique they used? Initially, I wasn't aware of that, but the more I started to want to become a speaker, I then started to know, oh yeah, they did this. They moved to there. They sat down there. They came down into the audience. Tony Robbins was one of the first people that really hit me with impact. But then equally, I had Wayne Dyer, who's very emotional. Why does Wayne Dyer make me just, I listened to one of his programs and I started to cry. Why did that happen? I rewound and I started to notice there was wording and sentence structure. So I started to note, alongside the learning, I started to note what my emotional reaction was to what they were doing. Does that make sense? So it was a little bit like, why did you, I'm in the car. Why did you brake? Oh, because a child just stepped out in front of me. Okay, so, all right, remember, anytime a child steps out, hit your brake. So anytime the speaker said this, I noticed they got a really good reaction. Let me try that.
Yeah.
And
so rather than just getting sucked into the message, you was almost pressing pause and saying, why did that just happen to me?
Well, it was a twofold thing, because this is a challenge. And I have to teach people this when they come to see me speak, is don't get hypnotized by me or what I'm doing. Because if you're here thinking, that's great, I love what he's doing there, you've missed the message. So I almost had to go, I mean, sometimes I'd go twice. I'd go and see the same presentation twice. The first time I'd go for the first experience and just capture. And then I'd go again and I'd watch it again. But this time I'd be going and I'd be noticing what they were doing when the reaction was happening. And then I would match what my reaction was to the way they did it. I noticed that. And I noticed he did that or she did that. I know it sounds really analytical, but to be the top of your game, I didn't know I was working to be the top of my game, but I realize now to be the top of your game, you have to break it down into such microscopic element and then find a way to own it yourself. It has to become yours. But I also did a couple other things. So one of the things I did was I went and studied neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. And the first course I went on that when I did my practitioner was, I think, 1995. So it's 95. That's like 20 years ago, 25 years ago now. And what that did for me, it gave me a set of, not speaker tools, but it gave me a set of mindset tools that I could use on myself. And when I was doing one-to-one coaching and mentoring, I could use it. But I could now integrate it into my speaking, so that when I needed to make a point or help influence the audience, I could bring that in. And when you start anything, it's like driving a car. It's very clunky. It felt very clunky. I was trying this, trying that. Now, if you watch, you can't even tell that it's going on. It's just a part of my nature. But that's 30 years of doing it.
So it used to be mechanical, because this puts into good context for people watching at home and those who have come through communicating with impact, and they're still practicing and they sort of feel like, I'm moving like a robot. I'm still presenting like a robot. But that's the mechanical part in terms of just trying to get used to it. Is that right?
You've got to be yourself underlying everything. And this is what we, as you know, we teach at CWI. So when people come to CWI, we get them to do several runs at the same thing until it starts to feel fluid. With NLP, when I say mechanical, it felt mechanical to me, but I don't think it was delivered mechanically, because my nature isn't to be mechanical by nature. But if you watch some speakers who are so systemized in their approach, in other words, they mechanically apply a technique, you can see it because it actually doesn't feel natural. And that's one of the things I have to round off with a speaker, that if I come across when they come to me and they say, Dr. Rowe, I'm having a few challenges. And then I watch them speak and I say, okay, have you done NLP training? I go, yeah, I've done NLP training. I've done this, I've done that. Okay, forget all that. What do you mean forget it? Forget it to start with. Let's go back to who you are. Let's get you shining through. And then all we do is we take you and we dress you with a slightly different set of clothes, and that's the NLP tools, until those clothes fit and they move. It's like a glove. First time you put the glove on, second time, now I've got the glove, now it fits and it's really nice. Yeah, that's where techniques come in. So I've learned when I'm training speakers that if I give them too much to do too quickly, they just go and they melt down. I've got a very good friend of
I was going to say, I know that from personal experience. So if I do a slot and I speak from a slot for you, when I come and have a conversation and get some feedback, you don't say, okay, do this next time. You just give me one, maximum two things to work on. And if I feel like, and you said it to me personally, if you think that's not your voice, that will be a part of the feedback as well. So that's the rounding
you did a recording
process.
for me on a deal, cracking deal, by the way, you did. And,
I remember this.
I'd seen you do it 4 or 5 times live, and you got it to a point where it's just natural. And then you did a recording, and it sounded very robotic. Hello, everybody. It's Harminder here. I hope you're enjoying yourself. And what it was, you're not now in front of the audience. And that's another major challenge for this type of thing, Harms. So if you remember, the last CWI event I ran, we introduced getting the camera out and teaching people how to talk like this on social media, because a lot of people are blocked. They've got amazing business opportunity, but they can't communicate like this. So even though we're talking about public speaking, I think public speaking is no different to me in front of the camera, but knowing how to talk to the camera like I'm talking to 1 million people. And that's definitely a big block for a lot of people. And that comes down to a system. Once you've got the system and you slowly add, it's like driving the car now. So I can't do everything all at once. I'm learning to drive. What's the first thing I need to, okay, let's start by turning on the engine, right? Off, on, off, on. Okay, yeah, I've got that. What's the next thing? Right, let's put the clutch down. Oh, shit, that feels a bit weird. Okay, yeah, clutch down. Although not in this thing because it's electric, but clutch down. Gear in, what gear? First gear. After a while, second nature. You bolt them all in, and before you know it, you're driving. And that's all speaking is about, as long as you've got an authentic message, which is another whole conversation altogether.
Yeah. So, right, from that point, okay, so I took us on a diversion. So from that point, you were aspiring to be on stage with these people. You're now cataloging, you're taking notes, you're saying, okay, why did that happen? Why did I feel that way? Incorporating it in your own speaking. And then when did you start to transition, number one, into a big stage? And a lot of speakers actually want to generate revenue from speaking. And did that come in the early days? Did you start, say your third speaking gig, did you get paid for that?
No, I mean, and again, this is a conflict for a lot of people, is I want to make money from speaking. And look, I've generated millions and millions of pounds as a speaker. So it is definitely possible. However, if you want to do this authentically, start by just not charging. Go out there and get as many opportunities to speak in front of as many people as possible, and hone your craft. Just practice. Go away from just bring one technique into the first time you do it, and then keep refining that technique and say, right, the next time round I'm going to add this to my armory. The good thing about the CWI process is the 38 components can take somebody, what I reckon would take them 3 to 5 years to learn, and we can compress that right down through the process. And this is why I'm excited about the book that's going to come out next year, because that's going to accelerate it for a lot of people. So you look, I mean, don't get me wrong. If you want to get paid and they offer you some money for it, great. But I think learn to give value, give huge amounts of value. And there will be a point where it feels right for you to start charging, or you might get a reputation where they say, we'd like to bring you in. What are your fees? At which point you go, let me come back to you on that. There are no fees right now.
That's when
the first one, I can't remember the figure, but it was probably like 500 quid or something like that, compared to thousands now. But in those days, whether it's a workshop, I can remember we started off doing early small workshops and getting charged £1,000, £1,500 or whatever. So I don't be greedy. Pursue excellence and give value. That would be my 2 tips from this live session today. Just pursue excellence and give value. And behind that, people go, oh, you should get so-and-so. You should get Harminder. He's amazing. Yeah. What does he charge? Well, he came and did it for us for free, but that was a couple of years ago. I think he may be charging now, but you know what? Go contact him. So that would be the big thing to start with. Just hone your skill.
Okay. Awesome. That's some good tips there for people listening. Now, to round this one off, is what was you doing this weekend, and how many people were you speaking in front of? And what does it take? I'm throwing 3 questions at you. What does it take to get yourself ready to speak on a stage of that level?
Forward to this weekend. So it went from conferences where I was going there to speak on my professional background to then personal development side. I happened to get into property, real estate, working closely with Legacy Rich Dad, as you know, as one of the students, as you were. And so up until that point, I had been speaking in different places. I remember even not long before that, I was out in Australia speaking in a corporate environment to small businesses. And then in fact, not long before my first property training, I'd been invited to a Master of Ceremonies in Jamaica. So I was being asked to go all over the place anyway. Then I learned property investing, and we grew so quickly. And I just thought, oh man, I want to teach people how to do this. This would be amazing. And I put myself forward for that very quickly. And I became the first speaker within that organization to actually go and do that. And what was great for me is it gave me a platform to then take a lot of the skills I'd already had and now use those in a property training environment. And what that did was I think it changed the game for the study learning environment for real estate from the way it was being delivered here in this country. And that's not about me, but it's just to say, I think there hadn't really been anybody with that background coming into this space, teaching that content with a mix of those two sets of experiences. And it accelerated people, because what was happening previously, a lot of the training previously has been about how to. And how to property is great, but if you haven't got the mindset, you haven't got the aptitude, and you haven't got the passion, the commitment, and all the soft skills you talked about, people flounder. So I very quickly started doing that, and I was doing that a lot during a year. I mean, I don't know, even twice, 3 times a month. So that gave me another platform. I was still doing my personal development stuff alongside that. Turning Point book came out in 2011, and that opened up another environment. So we decided to run personal development seminars there. Off the back of that, alongside Rich Dad Legacy, I was then able to go out into larger stadiums where I was invited onto big stage events with other speakers, people like Tony Robbins, people like Les Brown, as you just heard there, Richard Branson. I even shared the stage on one or two occasions with the President of the United States. I won't say his name. Before he became the current President of the United States.
Yeah. So that would have been great for your authority
back
previously.
Days, like, oh, really?
But now it's like,
the lady asked me the other day. Yeah, I said Donald Trump. She went, oh, really, Donald Trump? I said, look, don't. Anyway, so the point was, it was an opportunity to go into that space, and so that relationship has grown over the years. And then I took a break from the big stage global platform for about 4 years, as you know, because my youngest daughter was born, and this is a tough one for those of you watching, because in pursuit of passion and success, it's very easy to give up your values that you hold dearly to you, even if people are dangling a lot of money in front of you. And I chose to step back, and I haven't spoken in that environment since 2014, and December 2014 to be exact. In fact, I met a gentleman there in Berlin who, you know, amazing guy who does the internet stuff, Peng Jun. And he was like, oh, Ro, I haven't seen you for ages. And he said, I remember you having your baby. I said, yeah, that's the last time you saw me, because that was it. I stepped away from that space. And even though people have asked me to go back, I stood by my guns. It's not to say I didn't miss it, but, you know, how do you replace 4 or 5 years of your daughter growing up? How can you go back and rewind and do that? So not really a tough decision. If you ask me, was that a tough decision? Not really. Not when you put a life against it. So this was, so I had a request by the head of the organization that I do most of my work with at the moment, and they said, would you go out? So I said, I'll go out. So that's how I ended up in Berlin. And it was nice because I went back into a space and the organizers knew me, and that's why I was there this weekend. And it was although it was wealth, there was a lot of mindset involved in that process as well. So I am going to be going back out into the international stage. I'm looking to bring the family. I was doing it over the summer actually in Australia as well. It sounds very glamorous, and if everyone's watching this thinking, that's amazing, you can make a lot of money and you can be in front of audiences, the answer to that is absolutely you can. But you have to balance that up against, are you single? Most of the people on that circuit are either 10 years older than me and have grown children, or about 10 to 15 years younger than me, and either don't have kids or if they have, it's difficult to manage that. There's very few people with young children in that space. So as long as you can find a way to balance it, you're okay. But it's a great space.
That makes sense. So give us two or three tips. I got carried away. There's a
question. So remind me the question.
Okay, so I'm going to round it off with the tips. So I was going to say, what can people who want to enter a big stage, what tips can you give them? Let's assume that they're visualizing in their mind and they're saying, you know what, I am walking onto a big stage next year. What tips can we give them to help them out and be ready for the big stage? Because you probably got thrown in the deep end at one point. There was nobody to tell you X, Y, Z. So what's some tips you can give them?
So I think I didn't have the opportunity that people have today, which is you have social media. And the ability to publish a book, for example, now is so much easier than it was back in those days. So in order to get to a big stage, there's several levels of big stage. So the big stage I've just been on, unless you have a history, a credibility, a product to promote as well, and if you like, a relationship with that organization, it is unlikely you're just going to jump into that within the space of a year. And I'm going to still tell it as it is. However, there's other opportunities for big stage, which is where you go on as a guest speaker. You're not promoting anything. You have an experience in a specific area. So I could have gone into that environment with a slightly different content. I could have been a keynote speaker. So a keynote speaker comes up and delivers a very specific one subject, generally content piece for about half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, maybe an hour and a half. If it's a sales type conference or it's an event where there's other speakers promoting, you would come in and be dropped in as just as that specialist. So that's the other way into an environment like that, which means you've got to have something credible to talk about, something that's going to make people go, wow. Okay, if you don't have that, so that's 2 levels already. Now we're coming down to maybe you just get to do a slot alongside another guest. So I've in the past brought people onto stage with me and said, look, you want to get in front of an audience? How about you come and do 5 minutes or 10 minutes on the stage with me? I'm there as the person that's being well known, but I'm going to bring you up as a guest. So if you know somebody in that situation, so I'm going over to Singapore in about 3 weeks. I've got a friend that I'd like to bring to stage because he's got a great story to tell, and it's a Singaporean story. Before he knows it, he's going to be in front of maybe 1,000 people. That's another way to do it. Is you have a brilliant story you can share, maybe from somebody you've learned from, who's got credibility already. So that would be another idea. But alongside that, 2 things, and this is your specialty, so maybe you can talk about this briefly, is get yourself a social media presence. Start to build a following online, which you've been helping me do. Because if you look at some of my YouTube videos from, say, 10 years ago, we got 20, 30,000 viewings on those. But I didn't understand that back in those days. And the thing that you said to me, if you'd done this back then, you'd be a massive, massive authority just in 1 or 2 of these areas. And although, yes, I'm an authority, only because of the hard work I've put in the real face-to-face world, as opposed to the virtual world, which I didn't get back in those days. So your message to me was, had I carried on doing that, I wouldn't have to do the same amount of work I've got to do now. Even though the knowledge is here, I've got to still build the history online. So I think start building that following online. And secondly, write something. Start writing and capturing a book that you can not necessarily monetize huge amounts of money, but at least it's a calling card, turning point. Mine was turning point, turning point. Oh, you wrote turning point. Come and speak about the turning point. Oh, you're the guy that wrote turning point. Come and speak about the turning point. So that gives you something to talk about, and it's credibility on the stage. And please welcome to the stage Harminder Kaur, who wrote the book on whatever it was. Oh, wow, this is the guy. So they're the 2 things. And then not setting an expectation that's unrealistic. I'm not saying you can't be on a big stage, but you might need to piggyback somebody else just to get some presence there as well. But either way, start small. Just push it out there, because you might happen to be speaking at a free event and the CEO of a major corporation's there, and they say, oh my gosh, we got a young Asian guy here, left his job. Most of my employees come from that background, and we are downsizing the company, or we're trying to promote self-employment, or we're trying to employ, whatever it is. Could you come and talk on this subject, Harminder? How do you feel about that? I know you're not talking about that here, but you just said something that I think we could use you there. So unless you're out there throwing it out there, people aren't going to see you. So don't just do it virtually. Get in front of real faces.
Exactly. So I love that. So that's some fantastic tips if you're watching us have this conversation about, starting being a public speaker from 10 people to getting to the big stage. But I love the idea about the piggybacking. So I didn't actually have this connection previously, but the Growth Tribe's ambassadors, who are content partners, and what that means is they produce content on the Growth Tribe's platform. So, areas of health, wealth, productivity, time hacks, vocal power, elocution. So all of these things are their skill set. I don't necessarily have those skill sets to promote within Growth Tribes, but a lot of our members do. They're highly skilled people when it comes to the world of personal development.
You do. So they're doing, you've done it for the online. So Inside the Vault, there's that great series you created for us for online promotion and building an online business.
Very true. Very true. And so what we've allowed those Growth Tribes members to do is piggyback off the Growth Tribes brand, the budget, the digital marketing team in the background so that their brand and content gets out there. So we're going to publicize their name. And this is a great connection, actually, because it's one of the ways to get recognized out there is by piggybacking off an authority. So Growth Tribes is an authority, 1,500 visitors to the website a month, which is amazing. So those ambassadors will have their name as an author of a piece of content out there in the public.
But also,
so what I'm hoping...
So the benefit here is the endorsement. So whereas I've in the past gone off to ask people, oh, would you say this about my book or whatever? Now I can look at those partners that we're working with, go through their material, and then I can endorse it because I like it, which is great. So it gives extra weight as well to people that are doing that. And that's what you've got to learn to do, I think, generally, as a rule. It's not being afraid
and it's and just ask those who are close to you and say, you know, can we piggyback? Or hopefully that group or tribe you're a part of has a infrastructure like that. So that's pretty cool. So I think that's awesome. Okay, I think that's giving people some tips.
Harms, do people know about the Growth Tribes free podcast that we have? Because we went live with it recently. Can you mention it?
Good. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so 3 podcasts have gone live. It's called the Growth Tribes Podcast. To find it, you can either go on the website, that's growthtribes.com/podcast, and you'll see the first 3 episodes live there. Or if you got Apple, you go into iTunes and you just type in the search bar, the Growth Tribes Podcast. It's really cool because we're sitting next to Tony Robbins and Jordan Peterson, both big names in that field. So that's awesome. And it's a great feeling. And then if you are on Android, if you use Castbox, and again, type in the Growth Tribes Podcast, will appear there. So me and Ro are in cartoon versions of ourselves, and you'll see a white and purple logo. So that's what you've got to keep your eye out for. So why don't we
agree here to do a podcast on public speaking, on just speaking generally, because I think it's a subject that is coming up more and more. And a lot of people, I'm getting people saying to me, they want to speak publicly, but they want to know how to do this in the social media space and to be able to do it naturally. So I think it's a subject, we should address that subject.
I think we should. And also, you know, your experience, you work with public speakers who can do it face to face with people, and they're amazing. As soon as you put a video camera in front of them, they're like, I don't know what to say. So it's even transitioning public speakers offline to an online space as well. Yeah, so I think we should do a podcast on that. So we've had so far, podcast episode number 1 is me and Ro looking back into our past and what we wish we told ourselves in our teens, 20s, 30s, and for Ro, his 40s and 50s. So that's like millennial. Yeah. So, and I love the podcast. It's 2 different generations insights on, you know, those learnings. Then episode number 2 was about mentors and coaches. Whether you are a coach or a mentor, or whether you are seeking out a mentor and coach, why it's massively important in today's age. And there's lots of things happening in the background, in industries, in the economy, where coaches and mentors are vital to help our population transition. And then finally, we've got a great one, money management, money systems, and money beliefs. And that's a very powerful one. I've had personal messages. People send me things on WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, saying that was incredible. I just didn't realize that's who I was in that money space. So that's amazing. And then next week's one,
as well, that this is quite a frank space. So occasionally I go off on a bit of a rant during these. You have to calm me down a bit, but it's a very honest reflection of things. It's not one of these softy type spaces. It's some pretty straight conversations we're having, isn't it?
Yeah, it's direct. We've got some research behind it. We're talking about our experiences. We're talking about other people we know and their experiences without naming names, just to help the listener at home have some perspective and an awareness, and then also give them some tools that they can use to change that circumstance. So if you take the money podcast, if you've got money challenges, we talk about a tool and a system which you can implement immediately to start turning that around. And then next week, so I've had messages, people saying, when's the 4th podcast out? So the 4th podcast that comes out next week. And that one is a deep one. It's a serious message. But we, again, give you some tools and techniques, which is around mental health. Why do people feel anxious? What's happening around us for that anxiety to kick in? So that's all around mental health, and also managing mental health, especially for small business owners, entrepreneurs. If you're listening to this and you want to be a public speaker, the mental health is going to get tested. When you're out on the circuit speaking and you're out every single weekend and you've got a family at home, how do you balance that? That's going to be a different strain. So we have an open, honest discussion about it. And it's exciting. It's a great podcast. And it's one that think and feel you'll want to share with others around you as well. It's a hot topic at the moment.
Just to wrap up, because another subject is speaking. Those of you that are watching, if you're watching this now live, and I can see a few faces, and I see Ian and Emma just putting nice messages in there. But also, if you're watching the recording of this afterwards, please, if you're nervous or anxious about speaking to people in public or doing something like this through the social media, just do it, because right now there is so much shit out there and so much negativity and so much bad public media type content out there that is brainwashing people in a way that I don't want to go into it right now, which I think is unfortunately numbing people. We need real messages. And I think if you're watching this and you've got emotional development enough to even take the time to watch a live view like this, you've got a message right inside you. And you probably know that you're listening to me thinking, I know, Doctor, I've got that message. Please get it out there. Stay tuned into some of the stuff we're doing. I'll give you as many tools as I can as we're going through this process. Maybe come and listen to us on the Growth Tribes. But please, the world needs your message. And there's nothing worse than going to your deathbed with that message still inside you, which is why, you know, I'm thankful to people like Harminder and his team, because they've helped me scale my message out there. Because when I'm in front of an audience, I might only be in front of a few thousand here, whereas on the internet, we can go out to millions. So please, I implore you, if you feel you've got something to share, start sharing it. And as you watch and hang around, myself and Harminder, there's lots of different tools and techniques. And if we choose to run, and I am thinking about doing another one next year because we weren't going to do any more, if we choose to run another Communication with Impact event, keep an eye out for that, because one of the subjects I talk about is how to get your message through the phone and out to the public so you can really change people's lives, because it ain't enough just to do it in front of a few tens of people. That was my final.
Yeah, that's a raw rant. That's him.
Soft rant.
That's a soft rant. If you want to hear a proper rant, get onto the podcast. So I think that's amazing, because I didn't know some of those elements you shared there, Ro. So I think that's us signing out. We're giving some cool tools. I just wanted to have this conversation with you because the podcast is now live. It's coming out every single week. You just had an amazing weekend, inspiring and speaking to thousands. And you know, for people watching that, even people in that audience there, they're thinking, okay, there will be people in that audience thinking, I want to do what he's doing one day. So, you know, you're giving them some tools, show them that you can get paid for it, but there's a starting point, which is get the message out, one, via social media, and two, take as many speaking gigs as possible that you want to get involved in, and just start speaking.
It's not a competition. There are speakers with egos that will say, no, I don't want anyone to take the stage, whereas I'm standing on the stage thinking, how many people I can bring up with me? Because if we have enough voice, we're going to change the world. And that should be our fundamental message, that we have enough vocal power between us collectively to make a difference to the world. One voice is not enough anymore.
Absolutely. Okay, I think it's a great time to sign off. So thanks for jumping on this call, Ro, and inviting me on. And I think we should do a bit more of this. I think this is cool.
I'm up for it. This is, you've got me over the technology block, so thank you.
That's it. We've got you live, so now we can go permanent. I love that. All right, Ro, that's me signing out. We can end this now.
I shall press the finish button. Bye, everybody. Thanks for all the feedback.
Bye.
Cheers.